I'm Andrew Saunders, head of global brand strategy for Tastemade. Been at the company for about 9 months. Before that, was at NBC Universal for about 4 years, building their internal agency. And I think part of what I'm really excited about today is in the past 9 months, as a content marketer personally, I've learned probably more than I have in my entire career. And so my goal today is really just to kind of share with you guys some of those learnings. So as we go into Tastemade, the way we think about the company is it's really about inspiring the taste of a generation, right? And the generation that we're talking about is millennials. And so a lot of people, when they think about Tastemade, they think we're a food media company. But really, since day one, it wasn't about that. It was about the notion of all things taste, right? And it's also the notion of curating kind of best in class, right? So everything we do, we really try to bring a sense of curation to it. So one of the things I think is really interesting, and I'll kind of get into this a little bit later, is when I started 9 months ago, we were doing about 2 billion monthly views. This month, we're actually going to do about 3 billion. So the rate of growth in terms of views and viewership and active viewers has just been pretty staggering. And I think there's a couple things that we really attribute to that. One is the fact that everything we do at the company is data-driven. And that's not just for clients, it's really for ourselves. The way we program our content, the way we make talent decisions, the way we even choose the directors and producers on every single piece of content is all really driven by deep data and insights that we have. I think the second thing that's really contributed to that growth rate is the fact that we're mobile first. So when we started the company about 5 years ago, everything we do is mobile first. So the way we capture our content, and we'll kind of go into this, one thing I would explain is, like, if you look at our sets, for example, and I would invite you guys all to visit our studio, the first thing that people notice is they say, wow, these sets look really, really tall, right? And so what we're doing is we're actually building physical frameworks that are mobile optimized. The other thing that we're doing that's really interesting is if you go in, you'll see these custom rigs that we built for pretty much every single shoot. And if you look at the screens, what we're actually doing is we're capturing content simultaneously for every single platform, but optimizing it in real time so that we don't have to go back and basically produce it again. And then our post-production team, the way that it works is we have a really robust post-production facility in-house. And what you'll see is any given day, as we're filming content in studio, and we have about 7 studios globally and about 10 studios domestically, what you'll see is you'll literally see the same piece of content being edited across anywhere from 7 to 10 monitors, and we have people in real time optimizing it for every single platform. And the way that we're optimizing that isn't just about kind of the frame rate and the sizing of it, but it's really for that audience. So for example, you'll see when we're creating Snapchat content, we'll basically lean into the fact that we know there's a shorter attention span. So the pacing of the content ends up being significantly faster than other platforms, right? Or we started to learn through data, certain types of images up front will lead to longer view rates, certain types of images up front will lead to longer completion rates, and you'll start to see the fact that, even if you're watching a certain type of content across every platform, it really looks completely different from the next. And the third thing that I think has really contributed to this growth rate is the notion of global authenticity, right? So a lot of media companies are creating content domestically and then they're syndicating it globally. The way that we approach this is very, very different. So if you look at the black dots on the screen, so Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, London, Paris, Tokyo, we actually have physical studios in all of these locations. So when we're creating content for France or for the UK markets, not only are we filming it in market, but our content creators are native to that area, our talent is native to that area, and everything we do is kind of guided by the usage behavior and habits of that geographic region. So things that I would point out here really interesting. In Tokyo, for example, because there's such a high usage rate of Twitter, our Twitter numbers are through the roof, whereas in China, and this doesn't even contribute to the 3 billion right now, we ended up launching on Weibo about 3 months ago, and we're already doing 300 million views a month on Weibo. So I think one thing that's really interesting about Tastemade is the way we look at the company inside is it's really about kind of these 3 different areas. It's not just about content creation, it's about how do we create entertainment, how do we leverage that entertainment to create experiences, and then how do we use those experiences to actually sell physical products, right? And everything that we're doing is truly backed by data and technology. So we have, for example, a data science team from Google, we have an entire team of engineers in Austin, and I always joke that while on the outside we look like a media company, if you walk through the halls of Tastemade, it very much looks like a technology company. So, obviously everyone knows us for our food content. Recently we've also expanded into travel and home. And I think for us, the notion here is that not only are these kind of universal passion points, But for a millennial audience, these are really three of the largest passion points. And so what we say is, even if you're not endemic to one of these categories, these are the things that this audience is really receptive to. So how do you use these three areas as vehicles to truly reach and engage that audience? So I talked about this a little bit before, but I think one of the things that really kind of differentiates how we program to our audience, and I think also how we start to really grow diverse audiences, not just globally, but also on each platform, again, is we're optimizing it, right? So for example, if you're on Snapchat, quicker content, shorter content, telling the same story but in a much different format. Whereas if you're at home leaning back and watching our content on Apple TV, it could literally look like a 22-minute episode of a traditional TV show. So as we go into kind of the first part of the wheel, entertainment, I think one of the things for us that's really differentiated us is what I call kind of this notion of art and science, right? So if you look at our actual programming and development teams, we have Emmy Award winners from the Food Network, from Travel Channel, from Nat Geo, I come from NBC Universal, but really these are folks that have worked in kind of traditional entertainment for years and not only kind of seen what works and what doesn't work, but really have a sense for what premium quality really means. So I think one of the things that's been really interesting for us is Facebook Watch. So if you read a lot of the publications and articles that have come out, I think a lot of the news has been massive viewership for episode 1 and then massive drop-off rates for episode 2. For us, we've actually seen not only consistent viewership for every single series across every single episode, but we've actually seen pretty significant growth. So one example, which I'll go into in a little bit, we're actually doing about 1.3 million organic views per episode. Not only have we seen that number go up per episode, but we've also started to see a pretty significant subscription to the actual show page. And I think what's really interesting about that is, while we do have our flagship channel and travel channel and home channel, we start to basically have secondary channels for some of our most popular content, which not only can we grow our audiences on, but we can start to target those audiences back and forth, right? So I'm going to share with you guys, this is one of the shows we just did called Kitchen Little.
What would happen if the future generation of chefs led the way?
Hi.
I'm Richard Blaze.
I'm Emerson.
I am usually the chef. Today, you are the chef.
I get to be the boss. This is gonna be fun.
For the first time in my career, I'm totally in the dark in regards to what recipe we'll be creating.
All I know is I just have to do exactly what I'm told.
Guess? I have to guess?
Yes.
I know exactly what we're making.
I'm used to telling other people what to do.
Excellent.
Cheers.
Man.
We nailed it. Okay?
Okay, that was a cut.
So it's really interesting. If you look at this program, which again, long-form content on Facebook Watch, we did over 1 million minutes watched, and we drove 135% more emotional reactions than any other food publisher. And I think what's really kind of a testament to our relationship with Facebook is when they launched Watch, we ended up having 5 shows that they funded with us. And I think part of the reasoning behind that is, one, the very non-traditional approach that we take to content creation, one, helps us keep our costs for physical production very low. And 2, because of the way we collect data against our audiences, we actually have a really good sense of what will and won't work, right? So when we launch this, we're not launching it like a traditional media company and saying, hey, this is great programming, hopefully people will get excited about it, and it's gonna resonate with them. We're literally going into it knowing exactly what's gonna work and why. So if you look at this show, for example, you'll see a lot of big celebrity chefs. These are chefs based on our data that we already know resonate with our audience, right? And then we also have a sense of how many of our viewers are actually millennial moms. So the idea of pairing children with celebrity chefs, we're leveraging multiple data points to basically guarantee that it succeeds. And this is another watch show that we just did called Struggle Meals.
You know how easy it is to save 30% of your money? Life can be a struggle, but a good meal doesn't have to be. These are the perfect things to make a fried rice. It's $1.1246. It's $1.37. All we need are pennies and a piggy bank, a grocery store, and a little bit of creativity. It is irresistible. And it came from pizza dough. 28 cents of tomatoes, just like our caveman ancestors used to do. This is totally how they made their sweet tomato sauce. They bought the can and they crushed it by hand. No one's had a meal this cheap since Grandma took Grandma on their first date. Sriracha red pepper flakes, soy sauce, they're free flavor. I'm gonna show you how to make really inventive, delicious dishes that are under $2 a plate, and half the time you wouldn't even know they were that cheap. I'm Frankie, and this is Struggle Meals.
So this this has actually probably been our most successful watch show to date. So we did 7 million views across the series, grew 150,000 active followers just for the series page, and again, 234% more follows than the average food publisher. And I think, again, the thing that I would kind of lean into on this is the notion of data-informed programming. So what we did here is we looked at, and I'll go into the data section in a little bit, we looked at, again, what our audience was currently watching across all of our platforms, what they were responding to, what their comments were, and then we basically took a step back and said, all right, we have this pretty large population of millennials watching our content that just graduated college, that are cash-strapped, and one of the comments we would see over and over is, man, I wish I had the money to make this dish. So then we took a step back and we said, well, why don't we actually start to create really high-end gourmet meals at price points that these post-college grads can actually afford. And I think that's a big reason why this has been so successful organically. So as we go into programming, again, I think one of the biggest differentiators as I start to talk a little bit about kind of our branded content programs is we don't have what's called an A team and a B team, right? So at most media companies, myself included in the past, you would basically have kind of your programming team that was making your most successful hit shows, right? And oftentimes they don't want to work with the brands, and it's a push and pull. The difference for us is we actually have one team, right? So my strategy team of 20 all over the world is actually fully integrated with our programming, development, and production teams, right? So when we're brainstorming for a brand, the same Emmy award-winning folks that are making our original content are also making our branded content. And I think part of why that drives so much organic success is the fact that if you're a fan and if you're a viewer of Tastemade and you're watching a show and you go from original content into branded content, the transition is so seamless that typically the positive sentiment on most of our branded programs is north of 95%. So this is a program that we recently did for Airbnb on travel, and again, you'll see vertically optimized for mobile, which drove 16 million views and 355,000 social engagements.
Denver is quickly becoming one of the fastest growing major cities. Airbnb is putting me up in an awesome home near the Rhino District, where I'm excited to explore how...
So one of the things we always say when we're doing programming is this notion of how do you share with consumers things they don't know about things they already know, right? So what we're oftentimes looking at is we're saying, okay, based on our data, what are some of the destinations that millennials are most excited about, right? And so Denver obviously has been popping recently. And so the idea is, great, let's create content programming around Denver, knowing that people are already interested in Denver, but then let's identify the 5-6 places or things that they don't already know, right? And so that's that whole notion of let's not only entertain them, but let's inform them. And then again, another millennial insight is let's let them kind of be the influencer of their friend set. And then lastly, home and design. This is the third area that we recently went into. Our head of home and design is actually the former editor-in-chief of Dwell magazine. So again, the idea here is if you look at a lot of the content that we're creating, you have this millennial audience who oftentimes are living in major cities. And if you look at traditional home and design programming, it's completely unattainable, right? So one of the first shows that we actually ended up doing was around this notion of how do I transform a rental property and still get my safety deposit back, right? Because what we were seeing in the early days is we would post kind of a home makeover show, and literally people would write, I'm never gonna be able to afford that kitchen. Or that's amazing, maybe in 25 years I'll actually have that for myself. So again, what we're doing is we're taking the data and insights that we have against all of our programming and then programming against them. Kind of a great example of what I was talking about. So this is a series that we've created called Weekend Refresh, which has been probably one of our most popular home and design shows to date. And the idea here is, within the span of 24, 48 hours, with a very minimal budget, how can you transform a space and really elevate it? And I think the biggest kind of takeaway that I would bring to this is the notion of it's really not about the fact of whether or not you actually choose to go and do this. It's the notion that I can actually do this, right? So one of the most common things that we see underneath our content is literally the tagging of a friend, right? And we'll see things like, hey, we should do this together, or oh, hey, check this out. And it's interesting because we look at, again, kind of the success of some of this content, and I think it's that notion of accessibility and aspiration, but aspiration that's attainable. So this series today, we've done about 7 million views and done about 4.7 million minutes watched. All organic. going to zip through some of the stuff just because I want to hit the data piece. But this is a program that we did for Threshold with Target, and I think one of the things that I'm really super excited about is how we're leveraging data and research to actually prove ROI. So this is a program that we did recently, and just from a success rate, drove 7.4 million views, 127,000 social engagements, 26% increase in awareness of products. And then what I'm most excited about is the fact that we were actually able to use geo-targeting technology to track the viewers on our network and then track them within specific target locations and actually prove that we drove $2.1 million in revenue. So then we shifted to experiences, right? So the second piece of the wheel, these curated moments. So the idea is, if we're creating media, which is living across mobile devices, how do we take people from device to physical location? So one of the things we've recently done is partner with Smorgasburg, which is the largest open-air food market in the country, right? So Williamsburg, Soho, Los Angeles, Osaka. And what we're now doing is we're leveraging our channel and our audience to create in real-life connections between the two. So there's 7 locations, 1 million attendees, and a lot of what we're doing now is creating experiential content around things that we're activating against at Smorgasburg. So for example, we did a piece of content around the Museum of Ice Cream, which ended up driving about 27 million organic views. And so what we're seeing is the fact that even if people weren't able to attend an event, because it becomes so topical on social, they want to experience it, right? So by creating content that lets people, quote unquote, physically experience it, it actually drives a lot of viewership and traffic for us. And then now we started to do actually custom experiences for our brand partners. So this is an event that we did for Airbnb. And so what they said to us is, LA is a huge market for us. One of the biggest challenges that we have is the fact that because it's so spread out, and because of traffic, it's really hard for us to kind of bring to life all the different locations that we are, a part of in LA. So we created this event for them. It was basically a passport to LA. You walk in, you get a physical passport, and then every single station brought to life a different area of LA. So we had Koreatown, we had Little Tokyo, we had the beach, we had Malibu. And the idea here was through Airbnb, you were able to experience all of LA through culinary, right? And then again, we created content to amplify this across all of our platforms. And then this is kind of the stuff that I'm most excited about, which is the commerce piece. So one of the things that we don't really talk a whole lot about is that we actually have a cafe in Sao Paulo, which is now one of the top 10 restaurants in the entire country. And so what we're doing is we're actually taking content on platform, and then the highest trending content each week becomes the menu that week, right? So the idea here is you're at home, you're watching our content, you love that content, maybe you don't want to make it, but maybe you want to experience it. Now you can go to the cafe and every single week eat those items, right? The next thing that we're going to start doing this year is we're actually going to start launching markets. And what I mean by the sense of both physical and virtual is, again, this idea of, if we launch a 48-hour market in LA, but you physically can't get there, how do you experience it, right? So what you'll start to see is not only content around it, but custom sites where we're able to actually share some of those items and some of those experiences so that people living in the middle of the country can actually take part of it and purchase it as well. And then the last thing is pop-in. So this idea of how do we bring Tastemade into unexpected places, so whether it's hotel partners, whether it's travel partners, whether it's destinations where maybe we don't have a physical studio or presence, we're going to start bringing the brand to life in those areas. So this is actually probably one of my favorite things that we've done. So I think for us, we've been really focused on e-commerce and shoppable content for a while. And so we've been actually beta testing with our own audiences. So we'll create different types of content, we'll syndicate it to different audiences across our platforms, and start to see what performs and why. And so this is a really great example where we found this small boutique pan maker, Smithy, based in South Carolina, and we said, well, could we create beautiful storytelling around him and his product, and then leverage that to actually drive physical commerce? And the answer is yes. So we ended up doing about 7 million views. We completely sold out of inventory. We drove about $300,000 in revenue for his company, and we actually became the largest retailer for him. So the way that worked is we had this content running across all of our social channels, and then if you clicked on the link, it then drove you to our site, where you were then able to physically purchase the product. And so you'll start to see a lot more of this across Tastemade, where, again, we're really curating best-in-class items and then leveraging content to sell directly to our viewers. And then the last thing, I'm gonna jump in real quick, but it's probably one of my favorite things about Tastemade, is the data and techniques. So we always talk about this notion of art and science, right? So what we're doing, and we have about 5 years of historic data that we're leveraging, is we're looking at billions of data points ingested across all these platforms against all of our content, and then we're also leveraging real-time data against other platforms as well. And so what happens is when we combine that with the notion of our award-winning creative teams, we basically have what we call artful intelligence, right? How do we use data to basically inform the creation of art? So here's kind of a little look under the hood of how it works. So what we'll do is we'll look at, a date that's in the future, like 320, right? And what we're looking at here again is 5 years of historic data, not just based on search, but based upon our content. And we're able to see kind of all the different items that are trending, right? And then what we'll do is we'll take those items, I'm just gonna fast forward for you guys. We'll take those items and then we'll actually leverage those items to inform the content that we're creating, right? And then what we'll do in addition to that is we'll optimize the way we're actually creating the content itself. So this is a system that we have internally where we actually look at every single talent and we're able to look at that talent against both completion rate and swipe up percentage on different platforms. So as we're creating a piece of content based on what the KPI is, right? So for e-commerce for ourselves, we're looking for huge swipe up rates, right? For long form content, we're looking for longer completion rates. So we'll actually program our content with that talent, again, to optimize it. But where it gets a little bit crazy is we not only do this for talent, but we actually do this for our own internal teams, right? So we can look at, again, things like this for our directors, our producers, our writers, all of these folks in-house. And so what we do, it's a little Moneyball-ish, is we'll actually take all those different people, align them together to not only optimize what the content is, but how the content's created. And I think we personally believe that that's actually what drives a lot of our organic success. So this is how it works. So step one, we leverage our truffadadle, and we have to call it truffle because we're a food company. And then what we do is we basically take those insights, right? So we know on this given date that both pancakes and banana bread are trending for some reason for 5 years, right? So then we take our art team, we take our programming team, and we basically say, all right, figure out how to add some sort of edgy angle to this, right? So they go, well, let's create mini bites. And then we add a unique technique, right? So we're like, no one's really done this with an e-bowl skeever pan, so let's do that. And then we add a catchy title, right? Mini banana bread pancake bites. And the result is happy children everywhere and 27 million organic views, right? And then the other thing that's really interesting about this, just to kind of tie it all together, because we've got the data piece, we've got the art piece, is the fact that we also sold the pan through the site, and again, completely sold out, right? So not only are we driving organic success on our content based on our data, but we're actually selling physical products and we're doing it well. So again, when I talk about Tastemade, I think people think of us as a media company, but we're really much more than that. It's again the notion of how do we take premium entertainment, premium programming, leverage it to drive physical experiences, and then leverage all of that to actually sell physical products, all powered by data and insights. Thank you.